yeah. And recently we held a webinar on RAS technology, and New Treco, New Frontiers, Eric Spheric was telling us that, you know, the shrimp space just isn't quite there yet. Nobody's proven the costs. The costs have to come for sure. That we're talking about a niche product, so it's a bit like salmon, where, you know, you would expect to achieve a premium price to supply a fresh, never frozen, antibiotic-free, locally sourced shrimp. But his point was that the costs are just way out of sync with regular coastal farming. So what do you think about that? And do you think that gap can be closed?
Well, there certainly is a gap. And again, a lot of it is the capitalization. In terms of performance, I think that the performance can be very similar if you don't go outside of boundaries. But if, because of your capital costs, you have to increase the biomass and the pressure you put on the system, then you're going to decrease consistency, and it's all about consistency. It's about survival. So on a good coastal site, when we're doing well, you're at 80–85% survival. You're an FCR of 1.2. You're at a cycle time of maybe 80–85 days. You have a labor cost. You have a production. Many of those numbers can still be achieved indoors. We can still basically have an FCR of 1.2. We can still have a survival of 85%. But what we must have is that artificial environment we create, which is a capital cost we don't have in Asia. Now, where RAS has run into problems, as I understand it, again, I'm just getting into this space a little bit, but it seems that there's low survival and very little consistency. And consistency is a cost. So if I only have one successful crop every 3 crops, then, you know, that's going to be a very high cost. If every crop I can bet on 85% survival, I can bet on 70 days to get my crop out, I can bet on an FCR of 1.2, 1.3, then I've got a relatively operating low cost. Now you also have to put depreciation and the other costs of capital in there. But in terms of the operating costs, I personally don't see that there has to be a huge difference between Asia and these systems. Where there is a huge difference is in the capitalization costs. But it's all about that consistency and risk, which the industry has not shown. I mean, we basically have very low survivals on average. I don't know what the average survival is on RAS, but if it was below 50%, it wouldn't surprise me. Why is that? You know, so when I started this little journey of doing this, I had one question to myself: why do the shrimp die? Why do they die? And until we can really answer that question, I think there'll always be questions about these RAS systems. But shrimp die for a reason. They die for a reason. Shrimp don't just die. But we really don't have a firm grasp of what that reason is. I do know when we moderate densities, when we moderate and we stay within the bounds of the technology we're trying to implement, you can certainly have the consistency. But the question is, are those bounds and that consistency at such a low productivity you can't pay for the environment? And that's where I think we get into trouble. We push the systems harder than they're constructed to build. And so our consistency is not there, our survivals are not there. And therefore, in the end, it looks like our costs are very, very high.
Right, right. Of course, we couldn't go through this interview without mentioning the post larvae in your background there. And I understand that those are the CP post larvae, and you've mentioned that this breed of shrimp is doing a lot better in a RAS environment than maybe other types of post PLs in the past. Do you think that can be the differentiating factor in making this work?
Well, I think, you know, it's healthy PLs. I'm not going to say CP PLs per se, but we need healthy shrimp. Shrimp, there's a combination of factors in making a healthy shrimp, a healthy PL. But the shrimp that we're developing is not for RAS per se, but where RAS does have a big advantage, it should be totally biosecure. So when I'm running a non-coastal RAS and I'm using maybe my own made up seawater and I'm recycling it, and I'm using a post-larvae source that I have high degree of confidence brings no pathogens into my system, which is essential, essentially, I'm not having to fight named diseases. I still have stress, which will bring on chronic vibriosis, which is the big issue, I believe. But in terms of the named diseases, the white spots, the EHPs, the EMSs, the IMNVs, you're not having to deal with that. So you're really concentrating on minimizing stresses within your system and maximizing that output. So we basically concentrate on providing healthy animals. And then in terms of the genetics, I don't have to concentrate on creating name disease tolerance. So I don't have to put effort into white spot tolerance, IMNV tolerance, Taura tolerance. I can concentrate pretty much 100% on basic robustness and growth. Because when I look at the economics, and that's assuming that we don't have any named diseases. So, if I'm doing it right, I can get my 85% survival. And the economics then revolve around growth, cycle time, how long to grow the shrimp. And of course, growth is related to FCR. The longer in the cycle, the higher my FCR, the lower the survival, higher my FCR. But if I can get a shrimp out in 70 days, 60 days, with a survival of 85%, I'm going to have an FCR below 1.2. And so that's the economics right there. And so, yes, for indoor RAS systems, we introduced a strain this year where I really had put no effort into selecting for disease tolerance. Robustness, yes, because you do need a certain amount of robustness, but it was all about growth. And so we call that the Bolt line after Usain Bolt, fastest human being alive. This is the fastest shrimp alive. And I believe it's done very well. Again, the aim is to get more cycles per year, to get the shrimp in, to get the shrimp out, or get the shrimp out before it dies.